Okay, I believe we're at the appointed time for this special call meeting of Harnett County Board of Commissioners, May 21st, 2021, for the purpose of a continued discussion and work session on the proposed fiscal year budget for 2021-22. I'll begin by saying, following our work session on Friday, it came to my attention that there were some questions that still remained from some of the commissioners regarding the proposed budget, and that is why we are back here today. I do know that some of those questions or comments have been relayed to Mr. Wood so that he and staff could begin to look at those. What I would like, the format I would like for us to follow, and of course at the end we can have other discussions about the budget if needed. But the format I'd like to follow would be to turn the floor over to Mr. Wood, allow him to state what he has received, allow any other commissioners that would like to comment, question, whatever that may be. And then at the end of that time, allow any commissioners that might have something else that you'd like to make a comment about, have a question about, concern about, to voice that at that time. Then I would like for us to recess this meeting, give staff and Mr. Wood time to talk about, review, come back with any further clarification, any additional proposals, et cetera, at some point next week, and we can determine the time that works for everybody so that we can close out this budget process and have the vote on June the 7th. Do I hear any objection from fellow commissioners for that format? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
are we going to go through the nonprofit recommendations also?
Mr. Wood, do you have that on your list?
I did receive that list, so what I was going to suggest there, I have not made any recommendations on that, and the reason for that is the nonprofits are really a matter for personal preference on that, and so really that ought to be something that y'all decide amongst yourselves on what you want to do there. And added to the fact, I've been in the county for 5 days. I don't know the agencies. It wouldn't be fair to them for me to really comment on anything.
Understand. Okay. And that's why I want to allow you some time with staff following this, these questions or whatever may come from this meeting today before we address them for a final time.
Okay.
So, Mr. Weatherspoon, we'll let you bring that up at the end of the things that Mr. Wood has, if that would work for you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, before we get into the questions that were brought up, I'd like to update y'all on two things that are budget related.
Very good.
Yeah.
First, before we get started, pledge allegiance and communication.
Oh, forgive me. I was so intent on the format, I forgot to follow the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner Nichols. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's pray. Father, we do thank you for this day, this beautiful day you've given us. We thank you for this country, which allows us to have a meeting such as this to discuss all of the thoughts and processes that are involved in developing a budget for our county. We pray your hand to guide us as we talk and deliberate today. We thank you for all the hard work that has gone into the preparation of this budget. We ask your blessing on our county, state, and nation. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner Nichols. All right, Mr. Wood, I'll let you go again.
Okay. The first thing I wanted to talk about for just a minute is the airport. As y'all all know, we're taking that over June 17th. Isn't that correct, Chris? 17th. And of course, from that date, we've got to have employees out there I think everybody's satisfied with the job the employees are doing out there. But we've got to go through our standard employment processes. And so technically, you don't have a budget in place yet that covers June 17 through June 30th for this fiscal year and ends this fiscal year. The budget you're going to approve later this month that goes into effect July 1 will have all of that in there. But we need to come to you on June the 7th with a budget amendment that will cover those, whatever that is, 13 or 14 days in this fiscal year. So I wanted you to be aware, we will be coming to you with that budget amendment. Our staff has been working diligently on that. We're close. I think there were a couple of items we still needed to get resolved, and we'll be squared away on that. So wanted you to be aware of that. Technically, we don't typically advertise for job positions that haven't been budgeted yet. But you're going to approve the budget on June 7th. So what I'm asking you to do is, you can't vote in this. I understand this is a work session. So I guess I'm going to handle it this way. If none of you has any objection, I'm going to advertise those positions effective immediately so that we have them in hand and can make a decision. And before we hire anybody, you will have voted on that budget amendment, and then we'll have the appropriation in place. So all I'm asking is, let us go forward with the advertisement. And again, you can't vote on that, so I'm just going to make that decision administratively. But I wanted you to be aware we're doing that because of the time crunch involved. Is everybody okay with that? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question on that. When we do vote on it, we will be voting on part-time people and full-time people.
Yes, you will
I
be
don't
voting.
understand how you can have people doing basically the same job and have them paid differently.
Well, we're going to look at all of that. Basically, you'll have three types of jobs there. You're going to have an operations manager, you're going to have the chief line technician, and then you'll have some part-time people that are part-time line technicians. And those will all get the same rate of pay. The line technicians will. And what we will do in the budget is we will budget so many hours at that rate, and then we will have those people who come in at different times to do that. So that's what you would be voting on when we bring you the budget amendment.
Well, I can agree to that because I do think it should be some adjustment there. Just not happy with the I'll leave it at that until we get rid of it.
Okay. And our people have met with Heather to go over where these two full-time jobs should grade out on the pay plan. So we'll have all of that for you on the 7th. Okay. And if we follow this, then where we're at is we should be ready to go on the 17th. And I think pretty much all the other issues have been worked through. I do want to say your staff has done a good job of looking at all of the technical issues, buying out the inventory out there, the specialized insurance you have to have on an airport, things like that. So, and then we're looking also at the issue of the leases and getting involved there, but that doesn't really come into play on the budget at this point. So all I'm speaking to today is the current budget and then getting into the new one. My understanding is, since we're looking at a couple of corrections there, we may be coming back to you at the follow-up work session here with that finalized budget on the airport, and it may differ slightly from what you've seen before. Okay? Any questions on anything on the airport?
We appreciate that update and you and staff especially for making the preparations for that transition. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The second thing I wanted to mention to you is As I've looked through the budget and the priorities and that sort of thing, um, it's my opinion that the sheriff has made a strong case for needing to increase those salaries. We are losing an awful lot of people. And so the real issue is, and it's a lot of money, and I recognize that. The real issue is if you could do it over 2 years. And so I looked at that. The problem is if you go 5% and not 10%, it really doesn't solve the problem. We all saw the salary survey, and if you put 5% on that, it doesn't do us anything. And so I'm operating from the assumption that we need to go the full 10%. Now, having looked at that, I've met with Sheriff Coates, I believe it was yesterday, and he and I talked a little bit about it, and I told him it was going to be difficult to come up with the money, but I've come up with a proposal. He's amenable to it, and I wanted to run that by y'all today. It's roughly $731,000. He has assured me that that includes benefits. And with that, what I've asked him to do is see if on a one-time basis, and I want to stress that, this is a one-time basis, that he would pick up some of the vehicles this 1 year out of his forfeiture fund. Now, what that does is that frees up some money in the general fund that we can then put towards these salaries. And I recognize that's a one-time thing, but what that does, it's kind of the same as if we were doing the salaries over a 2-year period. It gives us a bridge to get to a second year of revenue growth before we have to eat the whole thing. And so he has agreed to that. He will do 6 vehicles, and that will free up about $171,000. So we've got 731 minus 171. So on the rest of it, I'm going to propose 2 things to you. One is, I think we've looked at the budget, and with some of the things that we're getting ready to go over, I think there are some areas that we can save some money in the coming year's budget. And then we would, if you're in agreement with those, then we can use some of that to pick up what's left, some of what's left. Then if we're still short, I'm going to recommend you use a little fund balance. And I don't do that lightly. I don't like to use a tremendous amount of fund balance, and y'all have done a very good job. I think you've limited it to 2% use of fund balance, which is very reasonable. And I want to have a little bit of a discussion about fund balance with you here. You have a history over the last, I don't know how many years, but it's been a consistent history. You're underspending your budget. You're doing a good job on your budget. You're underspending it, and you have been building up your fund balance. And so that's a good trend, obviously. But what that means is that your staff is budgeting conservatively, and by not using too much fund balance, what you're really doing is they're not using it. It's not being spent. So it's 2% that balances your budget, but you never really spend it, okay? So if we need $250,000 to make this work, my feeling is it really won't impact you because you're not going to spend it. Usually, if the budget's well done, your expenditures are budgeted, your revenues are budgeted conservatively, which means they should come in a little higher than what you budget. And you do the same thing on your expenditures, and typically across the board, there will be some underspending. And between those two, you're usually able to not use the fund balance. And that has been your history here, which is why your fund balance has been growing, okay? So between those 3 things, I think we can get there. And then that, it has the same effect as if we were spreading this over 2 years. And that's the only way I see that we can get there. And I know it's a lot of money, but this problem isn't going to go away. In fact, it's going to get worse every year if we don't tackle it. And, you know, there's a cost to having to go out and constantly train new people. And we don't want to be a training ground for other places. And unfortunately, I think we're either getting there or we've been there. So that's my assessment of it in looking at it. And I think that's a plan that would work if y'all are amenable to that. So I wanted to preface this other discussion with what we were looking at, because now you understand that as we look at if we can save some money, this is where I'm recommending we need to put it and deal with this problem. Now, I fully recognize that you haven't given COLAs in 4 years, so every other department is going to be frustrated as well. But the reality is we cannot afford to do an across-the-board pay increase and all of that. So what I've done in other jurisdictions where I've run into this problem is you try to take the worst ones and the most critical ones, and as you have the money, you deal with it. And in my view, there's nothing more critical than public safety. To me, it comes first. And so we've got a major problem there, and I think we need to address it this year. And then next year, with your new manager, they can start addressing some of the other issues. But, you know, it's obvious to me we don't have the additional funds to look at it from the whole organization, so you're going to have to take it in priority order. And one of the ways I look at primarily on that is you look at who's having the turnover problems, because that's where it creates the organizational problem for you. And obviously with the number of people that we're losing, and that's documented, in my view, we need to plug this hole first. And so that's what I'm recommending to you. So does anybody have any questions on that before we move into where we might save some money?
Anyone have any questions at this time? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wood. I think we're good at this point.
Okay. Well, why don't we go to some of the questions that have been brought up. So we've already talked about the nonprofits, and again, that is y'all's decision about what you want to do there. There has been some discussion about some of those items, and I think up to the point that you could save somewhere around $30,000 if you were to look at those cuts. So if you just want to make a note of that, we're not necessarily saying to do that. Again, that comes back to y'all. My understanding is that you had a committee that made recommendations on that. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay, so you may want to have them look at these suggestions and see what they say and bring that back at the continuation of this work session or budget session.
I think that would probably be a good plan, Mr. Wood.
Okay, all right, so we've dealt with that. So now let's go to these things.
That's what I suggest.
What I'm looking at is in community development, I guess I need to start flipping these pages here. Does everybody have their book, their budget book?
Everybody but the chair who
Oh, okay.
rushed out so quickly he didn't
Yeah.
grab
I don't
his.
have mine either.
Mr. McCoy and I will share this one.
Okay. I'm gonna go through these by page number where we've got issues. Under community development, there was they wanted to do $10,250 for this emergency home repair program. I'm not debating that that's not a good program, but we're in a very tight budget year. We're trying to come up with money to deal with a staffing problem in the sheriff's office. And so I don't think this is the year to start a lot of new programs. I'm not saying it's not worthwhile. There's always a lot of worthwhile programs, but the reality is we don't have the extra money to do some of these things, because we've got to deal with the sheriff's issue. So my recommendation would be that you look at cutting that one. And that's $10,250. Okay. Next thing is the Central Carolina Community College. We have capital funding for paving project at the main campus. What I'm going to recommend there is that I would look at deferring that for a year. But what I would like to do is let me go out and take a look at that. I haven't seen it. They're saying there's some pavement failure and that sort of thing. I'd like to see the extent of that, because I don't know if we're talking about something that could be a patch of a small area, or are we talking about extensive failure? If it's extensive failure, then we may have to go forward. But if we can put it off a year, I would recommend you do that, and because again, we need to get this done on the sheriff's part. Okay. If that
Mr.
works
Chair,
out,
this is Renee Pascal on the phone.
yeah.
Pardon me, but I would like to point out that deferring the paving project does not save anything, because those funds are coming from capital reserve. So what it will do is just maybe we won't make that transfer from capital reserve.
Well, that's the point, is you wouldn't make that transfer, and I'm coming to that later. And if you don't make the transfer to the capital reserve, then you do have the money in the general fund, correct?
If you do make the transfer from the capital reserve, you have the money in the general fund.
No, I'm saying if you don't make the transfer from the general fund into the capital reserve, you have it in the general fund. I'll talk with
That's
you about
true.
the details on that later. Okay. Okay, on administration, page 38, there's a request from the staff to add an additional person in the PIO office. Again, because of the tight year, I'm going to recommend you not do that, but you are going to need to put at least a quarter of that, which is roughly $6,500. And the reason for that is we have an employee who's going out on medical leave with a baby, and so that's going to be a 12-week maternity leave, which is a fourth of the year. So we're going to need at least that, because she's going to be on the payroll under sick leave. Her money's going to be still needed to pay her. So this will be some additional money while we get a part-time person to take that in. What they had hoped to do was go ahead and hire somebody where they would fill in for her, but then ideally would transition into a full-time slot. I'm recommending, because of where we're at on the financing, that you're not converted into a full-time slot at this point. That's not to say you might not want to do it in a future year. Okay. On facilities, page 41. Give everybody time to get to that page. Okay, they are asking for a full-time employee. The issue here is the 20,000, that only covers a half year. When you look at the notes in the budget, this was to fund it for a half year. So if you commit to this, it's not a 20,000 item going forward, it's a $40,000 budget going forward. And again, we're in a year where we haven't met the needs on the personnel side. And I just don't think it's good to be adding people when we can't handle what we already got. So I would remove that. Under finance, and some of this, I have not had time to even talk to the department head. I hope y'all can appreciate I've been trying to do this on the fly. But a little bit of this, what we're looking at here is, the question's been raised about why are supplies and materials a 17% increase and current services a 15% increase. And what I'm going to propose there is we just need an explanation of those figures with the details. And I don't know if you want us to do that here or let us go back, look at it, and get back with you next week. Do you want, because Lisa may be able to give you the details now, or Kimberly. I'm on
Page 42.
page 42, and I'm looking at changes in supplies and materials, and then current services and fixed charges.
Okay, Kimberly might be able to help on this too. The fixed charges, those are the banking fees for the credit cards. We're seeing a large increase right now with our credit card usage, and that's going up.
Okay, so that's not a one-time thing, that's just a spike in the utilization.
Yes, sir, and plus two, we do not receive interest income off our checking account balances the way back when the economic downturn, the way banks actually do that now, is that we have to keep a certain amount of cash to offset.
So you got a compensating balance.
Yes, sir, that's
Okay.
correct. And so those fees have been sequentially going up, and then every year when our fees renewed with the bank, we're seeing a huge spike in our fees from the bank. So
Okay.
that's a lot. But
When was the last time y'all bid out banking services?
it's probably about 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay. You may want to put that on your list to think about down the road. Well, if y'all don't mind, that's probably the explanation, but let us get with that, and let me look at those line items with you. But it sounds legitimate to me. I don't think we're going to be able to save a great deal there. Okay, fleet maintenance, we got the same issue there, page 43. We've got a 17% increase in supplies and materials, and current services is up 15%. And I'd just like to see more detail on that as to what's driving that, because those are significant increases.
Do you need to talk about that real quick?
We can if you're ready to.
With the fleet, okay, I just answered his, we'll back and address yours, the
Okay,
additional
all right.
questions you have on that.
Okay, let's do that. Then on page 43.
Lisa, do you want me to address that?
Yes, did you work with that one?
So, we are already overspending in our fleet services, in the current year, and our mileage has been down countywide because of COVID. And these were our best projections based on trending out our current spending. It's tires, vehicle parts, and outsourcing. We don't do body work in the garage, so we have to outsource the body work. But that all flows through the garage's budget. So it's just expenses in, it's just basically taking care of the vehicles that are on the road right now.
Okay. Well, of course, the body work can fluctuate, as y'all know. That depends on how many bump ups you've had and that sort of thing. Let me look with them at the supplies and materials, because that's grown pretty significantly. Okay. Page 43, under fleet again, there's a 231% increase. And some of it was what we just talked about, but I'd like to sit down and,
I can explain the net cost increase. This is Renee.
Okay.
Last year is the first year that we charged out labor to departments, and so we overestimated the revenue that was coming in.
Okay, so basically that was a startup situation. You were doing your best guess, and it hadn't panned out like you thought.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And I'll look at that with y'all too on that. Well, it doesn't sound like we're going to have any significant savings on that. All right. Okay, Human Resources, they have requested an additional position, page 46. Yeah, what they're wanting to do is to have an employee to perform duties such as creating metric reports, updating internal procedures, redesigning HR forms, and working with the director on various analytical projects. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but if we don't have the funds to take care of the existing employees, we don't need to dig a deeper hole by adding to the number of the workforce that we have. And so I would recommend you hold off on that. You may want to look at it next year, but I would not fund it this year. Okay, the next one is on Human Resources, same page 46. Let me get my bearings here. I think the question was why there was a 63% total and 78% net cost increase on that. So again, I think I'd want to get with.
That's because we moved the liability and property insurance to the HR department. It was previously under facilities. And since HR manages the liability insurance, we moved it under them.
Okay. Is there a corresponding decrease then in that department?
Yes, in facilities it is.
Okay. All right. So that's just a repositioning of where you're taking it out of. Okay. Is everybody clear on that?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Now we get to Harnett Regional Water. Page 106. Now, one of the things, let me preface some of this by saying that Lisa and Renee have been working with the fleet manager on looking at how to go about fleet replacement, and they're going to have a proposal for you. I'm going to get a briefing on that. I believe it's next week, if I remember correctly. Okay. Tuesday. So I would like to defer these until I go through that, but I do want to tell you where I'm kind of leaning right now on those. There's two schools of thought on this. One is that you buy the equipment, you try to keep it well maintained, and you keep it just as long as you can. The other is, and one of the proposals they're looking at is basically you buy the equipment, we get a discount because we can buy under state purchasing for most of our equipment, okay, most of our vehicles. And then you keep it for about, I think they're looking at 60 to 75,000 miles, and supposedly that's the best time for resale to go ahead and trade it in. So as you can see, those are two different philosophies on how to deal with this. And so that's what they're wanting me to look at before we discuss it with you and see what you want to do on that. But we're at a point now that we need to make some decisions this year on these. One thing about Harnett Regional Water, and y'all already know this, is it doesn't impact the general fund. So, for instance, if we do delay replacing a truck or whatever, if it comes up later that it was bad enough that we should have replaced it, we can always come back and do a budget amendment because they have their own source of funds. So it's not like it would negatively impact them if we thought they might be able to get another year out of a vehicle and it ends up they can't. Is everybody following that? Okay. So what I'm gonna propose there, at page 106. I would recommend that you do, two of the trucks and defer one of them. And again, if we find out that we needed to do all three, you can always come back and make a budget amendment on that. Okay. On sewer collections, page 107, we've got $261,000 there. That's for two trucks. One is the one truck and one sewer pump truck. And the sewer pump truck is a specialized truck, correct?
Correct,
And that's where the bulk of the money is?
absolutely.
Okay. So, what I want to do there is see if we can hold that off for a year on some of it. That's 106, page 106. I'm sorry, that's 107. 107. What I'd like to do there is check with the fleet manager on the maintenance issues to see if they can go longer. I don't really have that information right now, but we'd want to do that and get with Steve as well. So that's one I'd like to come back to you on at the next meeting. And particularly on the pump truck, because that's the bigger of the two, and see what the condition is there, and if we can get another year out of it.
We actually checked with the garage, Lisa did some follow-up and me as well. That 1999 sewer truck,
Yeah,
Johnny's got the mechanic at the garage, and I quote, "needs to go. Motor smokes when hot, it's worn out. Spent $2,100 in March, spent $17,000 since we owned the truck." So a 1992 truck.
Yeah.
The motor's been replaced several times.
okay,
And it is, I know it's expensive, but we're not gonna get anything out of that truck. It's gonna sit there, because we don't use it now. It's just worn out, as most of these vehicles are that we're recommending be replaced. Probably some of them could be looked at, like Johnny's recommended that a meter reader truck, if it's got 120,000 miles on it, it's worn out. It's not on this list, it's not worn out. Some of them won't even run now, they're in that bad condition.
And I have forwarded you the emails from Beth Linson, who's our fleet manager.
yeah,
She pulled all this information shortly before the meeting, and I forwarded it to you.
okay,
So we have, the maintenance information, if we want to discuss that now.
Okay.
On each of these.
well, why don't we just bring that up at the next meeting?
Okay.
But that's the kind of information I want to see.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, 109. Again, I think we have the same issue about the trucks, so we just need to take a look at those as well and sit down with the fleet manager and y'all and go over that, okay? Because what I was looking at is if we could defer one and do the other. Okay, now you've got two backhoe requests. I would do the same thing there. Let us look at the age on all of those. Okay, 117. This is general government capital reserve. If we take it out, if you don't do the resurfacing, then I think this affects that as well. And I need to get with you and Renee on that and make sure we're
Because
tracking.
the money that's in the general fund budget to do that paving project at Central Carolina, the revenue is coming from this fund. So if you cut that expense out or defer that expense in the general fund, you're gonna take away a revenue, so it's gonna be a zero impact.
Right, and that's what I want to look at. Okay. Okay, the sheriff's capital reserve, I think, on 120, I think we got that resolved. you had used about 447,000 of fund balance last year, and that's why it decreased so much this year. You're back to 450,000 a year, right? Okay. The next one I wanted to have a little bit of discussion on, and that is, you've got the capital reserve, page 122. This is on the apron expansion. I think there's been some discussion about could that be asphalt or does it need to be concrete? And I think we need to look very strongly at trying to do that as concrete. But I don't know what the cost differential will be yet. But I'm concerned that if you get pretty heavy planes there, it can create a problem on the runway. I mean, on the apron. Okay. This other one that was brought up is, and I think Mr. Weatherspoon brought this up at the meetings, recommending moving the North Harnett wastewater treatment plant and the South Harnett wastewater treatment plant upgrade to 22-23, and I think you gave me an amended sheet on that. So I think you already did that. And I think it also included taking the Northeast Harnett. Did it go to 24-25, or did you have a different year on it?
Yes, sir, we moved it to 24.
Okay, so that's been done. All right. And then we have the parking lot resurfacing, so we'll get together on that and make sure the transfers from for each of the funds there. I think that's it. On the auto read meters, there was some question about whether we would debt finance that or take it out of funds, and I think Steve has convinced me the way he's doing it over a 3-year period with current funds is fine. So that's basically what I have, and I think that's in response to everything I got.
Thank you, Mr. Wood.
Okay.
Okay, well, at this time, is there anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment on any of these items that Mr. Wood has shared with us up to this point? And keep in mind, if you, after we recess this meeting, if you have a question or think of something or see something, feel free to give him a call and share that with him. I think he would welcome that. So.
Right.
Okay, hearing no further question or comments on these items, let me move on to the second part of the format I laid out in the beginning. Or is there any additional questions or comments or explanation that anybody would like to have regarding these items or anything else that you saw in the budget? Okay, hearing none, or hearing nothing else being brought forward at this time, and that, again, that doesn't mean you can't, if you see something, you can't bring it forward next week. And I think what we would need to do at this time is to set do you want to set a time now or wait until afterwards where you can look at your calendars to set a time to come back, get results of staff discussion, and
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
think if we're going to recess the meeting and not adjourn it, and I'll defer to Chris on that, I think we have to have a date and time certain.
okay.
Is that-
So we need to set the date and time now. Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Wood.
Okay.
Fortunately, next week, we did not have a work or regular meeting scheduled for next week. So, Mr. Wood, how long do you think you and your staff would need to research this to your satisfaction before we meet again?
Well, our deadline for putting things on the agenda is next Thursday. So I would like to, here's how I would like to handle what we want to have on your agenda for the 7th, hopefully, is adoption of the budget.
Right.
And I'd like to outline for you how I normally do that and see if that's agreeable or if we need to do something else. Normally, the way I would do it, it would be a motion to approve the budget as presented, subject to the following changes. And then we would simply list those in the motion. And so ideally, I guess I would like to have it by the 26th, the meeting at least by the 26th. That gives us 3 days next week to review all of this and make a recommendation to you on the 26th. It gives us time after the meeting on the 26th to then work up that list and make sure we have what all the changes are, and then we would prepare a motion for you to adopt the budget as presented, subject to the following changes. Now, does that work for everybody?
Mr. Matthews and I are going to be out of town on the 26th, that morning. We'll be back,
Could we do it in the afternoon?
yeah, as long as we do it,
Well, the afternoon would be better because that gives the staff a little more time
yeah.
to.
I would prefer 2 or 2:30 on that afternoon.
Okay.
That would work for me.
Good with me.
Good.
Good.
Mr. Corey, you know about Tuesday afternoon for you?
Wednesday.
Tuesday afternoon's good.
Wednesday afternoon.
Wednesday afternoon.
2 o'clock.
26.
26, yes, ma'am. So I think I hear or see everybody saying that 2 o'clock on Wednesday, 26th of May would be a convenient time to call this meeting back to order to continue our discussion. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Chris, that satisfies that. Next Wednesday? Yes, sir. Very good. Okay, any further comments, questions regarding the budget? If not, I will declare this meeting in recess until we reconvene on Wednesday, May 26th at 2 p.m. in this room. Thank you.
So is there no meeting June the 7th, 9 a.m.?
There is a meeting June 7th. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
This will be before that.
We're gonna have a closed session